study and branches of biology.
Biology and its field of action. Biology studies life from different standpoints, from the structure of atoms and molecules to the biology of the evolutionary development of populations, to other areas of study and branches of biology that have been incorporated over time, such as anatomy, anthropology, botany, embryology, biomedicine, biochemistry, genetics, histology, etc. But how did life originate on the planet? For centuries, it was believed that a supreme being created life, and also that it was generated spontaneously. As knowledge progressed and succeeded in establishing principles and facts that it could be demonstrated, other possible explanations for the origin of life were formulated. The truth, until now, is that everything that has previously happened gave rise to a system based on that deoxyribonucleic acid, DNA, and ribonucleic acid, RNA, capable of storing information to create various molecules and edit their modification.
Characteristics of living beings and differences between prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. Characteristics of living beings. The characteristics that unify living beings can be summarized in 8 points: organization, genetic code, response to stimuli, homeostasis, metabolism, growth, reproduction, and adaptation and evolution. Organization. Life on Earth is characterized by being organized in levels, in which the lower ones give sustenance to the superiors, and nothing can exist or function without this complex organization. Genetic code. All living beings share this essential characteristic. The genetic code indicates the sequence of amino acids that code for the 22 amino acids that constitute all the proteins of all organisms in the earth. Response to stimuli. Living beings can respond to different stimuli such as light, sound, temperature, chemical substances, among others. Life strives to maintain its balance, even if it has to spend energy to achieve this. Homeostasis refers to the set of self-regulation phenomena that lead to the conservation of a steadiness in the composition and properties of the internal environment of an organism that allows it to have a free life. Metabolism. Living beings take components from their external environment, transform them, and use them for their benefit. Metabolism involves the destruction of molecules, that is catabolism, and the formation of new molecules or anabolism. Growth. Growth implies the incorporation of new biomolecules into the organism, which is synthesized for that purpose. Reproduction. To perpetuate their species, individuals must reproduce themselves. The biomolecule whose function is to contain that information is DNA. In the genetic code contained in the DNA is found all the information necessary to create a new individual. Reproduction can be asexual, sexual, or parasexual. Asexual reproduction. Its main characteristic is that the fact that the descendant is genetically identical to its predecessor. Sexual reproduction. This type of reproduction involves the fertilization of two different cells, the sperm and the egg. Parasexual reproduction. Through parasexual reproduction, genetic variability is achieved through the exchange of DNA that is carried out by conjugation, transduction, and transformation. Adaptation, ability, and evolution. The world has changed, is changing, and will change. Every one of the species settled on this planet is forced to adapt and evolve in order to survive. If it doesn't happen, the punishment will be the extinction. Thanks to genetic variability, individuals, even if they belong to the same species, have slight differences. When the environment changes to a greater or lesser extent, these small differences determine whether or not an organism can survive, adapt, or die. If the environment changes, the organisms that live in it must transform themselves to adapt to that change. Differences between prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. Cell types can be divided into two: prokaryotic cells, which comprise archaea and bacteria, and eukaryotic cells, which include animals, plants, fungi, and protozoa. The main difference between eukaryotic and prokaryotic cells is that eukaryotes have an endomembrane system, whereas prokaryotes don't. Besides, eukaryotes are usually larger. The endomembrane system comprises internal membranes, that is, the membranous organelles including the nucleus. The membranous organelles bestow the eukaryotic cell the advantage of organizing and making more efficient the use of its cell resources. Prokaryotes are always unicellular. It is because to survive, each cell is constrained to do everything it needs, not so in the case of multicellular organisms, in which there are specialized cells. Prokaryotic cells are simpler than eukaryotes, but in no way should be underestimated, since they have been successful survivors on the planet despite time and extinction.
We must identify
History of the microscope, the cell, and the cell theory.
structures invisible to the human eye. The microscope. History of the microscope. Man has always wanted to see both to what is far away and what is very small. The observation of the world of tiny things began with magnifying lenses, known as the composite microscope. The invention of the oldest magnifying lens took place in the Syrian Empire in 750 BC. Until the 13th century in Italy, artisans began to carve magnifying glasses that were used as spectacles. Gradually, this use oblique manufacturers to improve and refine their carving techniques, which culminated in the invention of transcendental instruments such as the telescope and the microscope. Who invented the compact microscope? Nobody knows the answer. Perhaps Zacharias Janssen in 1590, Galileo Galilei in 1609, or Cornelius Drebbel in 1618 were the inventors. We can say microscope was invented at the end of the 16th century and the beginning of 17th. Historical evidence points to Zacharias Janssen as the most likely inventor, since he worked with his father and both were engaged in making glasses. He had the idea of combining two lenses inserted at the ends of the tube, so he achieved a greater magnification range than with one glass. The magnification range achieved by this microscope was between 3 to 9 times. This type of microscope had the basics: one lens that worked as an objective and the other one as an eyepiece. Janssen did not foresee the potential of his invention, but Robert Hooke in 1665, yes. He linked the history of the microscope with that of the cell. Years later, Anton van Leeuwenhoek developed lenses that allow him to observe samples with magnification up to 200 times. The microscope was rudimentary. History of the cell. The story begins with Robert Hooke, who in 1665 published the observations he made with the microscope he created. Hooke observed the bark of the cork, and noticed its tissue was made up of small spaces. He gave to these spaces the name of cells, from the Latin cellulae, that is, little chambers. What Hooke observed were dead vegetable cells. The description of the cell content had to wait some years until Anton van Leeuwenhoek observed and described in more detail cells such as spermatozoa and protozoa. Leeuwenhoek's observations were so precise and detailed that if you compare the drawings he made with images obtained with current microscope, the differences are minimal. It was not until 1830 that Theodor Schwann and Matthias Schleiden proposed what later became the first postulate of the cell theory. The cell is the elemental unit of plants and animals. In the 19th century was abundant in cellular discoveries. Robert Brown described the nucleus in 1831. Johannes Evangelista Purgi introduced the term of protoplasm. He first described what now it is cytoplasm in 1839. Meanwhile, Rudolf A. von Kolliker identified the mitochondria in 1857, and Rudolf Virchow proposed that all cells come from pre-existing cells in 1858. This became the second postulate of the cell theory. The work with Louis Pasteur and the metabolism of yeast and species in 1860. August Weismann discovered that both current and ancestral cells are similar in structure and composition in 1880. In the 20th century, 1931, a real breakthrough was achieved with the invention of the first transmission electron microscope. Cell theory. Many researchers participated indirectly to generate the postulates of the cell theory. However, three of them are recognized as authors: Schwann, Sladen, and Birchall. 1. All living things are made up of cells. 2. Every cell comes from the existing one. 3. The cell is a psychological unit of life. 4. The cell contains the hereditary information for the control of its development, growth, reproduction, and to transmit information to the next generation. We can add a fifth postulate: that disease begins with the cell.
Levels of organization. Cellular transport.
Everything that enters or leaves a cell has to pass through the cell membrane. This process is carried out by cellular transport. Transport can be classified according to the amount of molecules that pass through the cell. If they pass one by one, the transportation can be active or passive. Active transport spends energy and goes against gradient of concentration. Passive transport does not waste energy and goes in favor of concentration gradients. This transport can be divided into simple diffusion, which means the molecule crosses the lipid bilayer; facilitated diffusion, which means the passage of molecules depending on the presence of the integral membrane proteins that allows this passage; or ultrafiltration and dialysis, which means water and some solutes pass through a membrane due to hydrostatic pressure. When the transport through the membrane is in large quantities of material and with energy expenditure, that is classified as endocytosis, which means incorporation of material into the cell, or exocytosis, which means secretion of the material produced by cell. Levels of organization. The components that make up living beings and living beings themselves constitute levels of organized complexity. The first level in this complexity is the atom. Then the atom forms molecules and biomolecules. The biomolecules constitute the organelles and structures. The set of organelles form the cell. A set of cells specialize in specific functions from a tissue. The tissue forms organs. The organs then group into systems. And in a multicellular organism, the systems constitute the individual. Then, individuals of the same species make up a population. Then a set of population forms a community of biocenosis. Then, the grouping of population of all domains constitutes the ecosystem. And the total set of ecosystems present on the Earth is the biosphere.
Organ systems and homeostasis.
The term homeostasis refers to the quality of organisms to preserve their internal conditions despite the changing conditions in its exterior or interior. This means that each cell will take care of its self-regulation, that is, of maintaining its homeostasis. The preservation of internal conditions is achieved thanks to metabolism. One example could be the regulation of body temperatures. The homeostasis requires the participation of a series of factors, which are the variable, the sensor or receiver, the integrator, the set point, and the effector. The response of this circuit can be stopped once that reaches the set point, what is called negative feedback, or increase the answer, positive feedback. One example of negative feedback is the maintenance of homeostasis of the blood glucose. Main systems of the human body. The cardiovascular body transports oxygen, nutrients, and other substances to the cells and removes waste. The organs of the system are the heart, blood, and blood vessels. The lymphatic system defends the body against infections and diseases. One of the organs are the limbs. The digestive system processes food and absorbs nutrients, such as the organs such as mouth, salivary glands, esophagus, stomach, liver, and pancreas. The endocrine system provides communication within of the body throughout hormones. One of the organs are endocrine pancreas, adrenals, testicles, and ovaries. Integumentary system provides protection against injuries and loss of fluids. The organs are skin, hair, and nails. The muscular system provides movement, support, and heat production. The organs are skeletal, cardiac, and smooth muscles. Nervous system collects, transfers, and processes information. The organs are the brain, spinal cord, nerves, and sensory organs. The reproductive system produces sex cells and sexual hormones. The organs will be the vagina, ovaries, mammary glands in women, and the testicles, seminal vesicles, prostate, and penis in men. The respiratory system delivers air to places where gaseous exchange occurs. The organs are the mouth, nose, trachea, lungs, and diaphragm. The skeletal system supports and protects the soft tissues of the body. The organs are bones, cartilage, tendons, and ligaments. The urinary system eliminates excess water, salts, and waste products of blood and body. One of the organs are the urethra. The immune system defends against microbiological pathogens, and some organs are the leukocytes, tonsils, and the spleen.
Health and diseases, healthy adolescents, healthy lifestyles.
So we know that everything in our body is finally regulated by mechanisms. Therefore, a disease is the loss of balance and homeostasis. Currently, health is affected a lot by industrialization. There's also an issue of worldwide concern because health is the ideal state that all people want to achieve. We also need to know that there needs to be a balance between social, physical, and mental health. It's not only about the physical state. You have to have a balance between those three. Now, an important thing that we need to talk about is adolescent health. We know that adolescence is the stage characterized that is a transition between childhood and adulthood, which implies that there's a lot of physical, cognitive, and psychological changes. In general terms, adolescents are considered healthy people because physically their body has the strength to overcome diseases even better than young children or older adults. In this stage, there's a lot of changes such as hormonal changes. There's a lot of change in their body, like their weight. There's also a lot of changes in their brain. And a very important one is the cognitive maturity, which is when the young adult has the capacity to understand abstract thinking. And in this stage, there's a process called identity search, which is natural and even at a certain point healthy, because it is based on assessing achievements related with trust, autonomy, and initiative, which helps lay the foundations of adulthood. We also need to talk about risk factors in adolescence, and first we need to know that a risk is considered as the contingency or proximity of damage. Some examples of behavioral risk are the consumptions of harmful substances or junk foods, such as physical inactivity, spending much time sitting, exposing to the sun for a long period of time without protection, not having necessary vaccines, etc. There is also physiological risks, which are involved with the body and the biology of a person. Some examples are obesity, overweight, high blood pressures, high cholesterol, among others. A very important thing to say, there's a risk factor related to depression in adolescents, which is anxiety, fear of social contact, stressful life events, chronic diseases such as diabetes, etc. After knowing all of these things that can affect the health, we also need to know that there are some healthy lifestyle choices we can take. There are 7 behaviors that lead to health. So the first one is sleep between 7 to 8 hours a day. The second one, have breakfast every day. Third, perform 3 meals a day. 4, maintain body weight within acceptable limits. 5th, practice physical activity regularly. 6, do not consume or moderate the consumption of alcohol. And 7, do not smoke. So each person is responsible for their physical, emotional, and social health with reservations of variables that cannot be controlled. Because although each of us can decide to take our refreshment every day instead of water, it is also true that there are variables of life that complicate autonomy in decision making, such as the economic situation, conflicting family or cultural environment, living in areas that are in situations of violence such as Syria, or lack of access to basic services, among other causes. However, despite these variables, and perhaps with greater difficulty, they can take another action alternative that helps avoid diseases.